1045 The Team, 1045theteam.com. Armen and Levack. Armen doing a little vacation thing, and I know this one's breaking his heart because he loves this guy. Brought to us by Buffalo Wild Wings, Buster Olney. Buster, first things first, did the Yankees' untouchable prospects just become touchable because of Toronto bringing in David Price?
No, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that, just knowing Brian Cashman and how he really believes in the idea of building up a farm system, I think, as he began the process, he told any of the teams that were dangling any of the big names, look, I'm not trading Severino, I'm not trading Judge, and I'm not trading Greg Bird, who were the three big prospects. And look, they had an opportunity to get in on David Price, but they held the line and said, we're not going to trade Luis Severino for a 2-month rental. And that's what David Price would have been for the Yankees, and that's what he's going to be for the Blue Jays. He's going to be a free agent in the fall. And, we saw a few years ago when the Mets got Zach Wheeler for Carlos Beltran. Those type of deals are rare now. Teams don't like to give up value. So I don't think the Yankees are going to change their stance to give up any of those top prospects. I do think that you will see them really explore some of the possible deals here in the last hours before the trade deadline and do something significant, because I think they're in a position where they got a lot of money available and they have prospects available below those big three. And I think that there probably could be some opportunities that could pop up, like with the San Diego Padres, perhaps, about someone like one of their starting pitchers, or Craig Kimbrell.
Now, when we look at this evening, we're hearing that Michael Pineda has been scratched. Not a lot of details on that yet. Does that push the Yankees even more? Like, is everything pushing them towards making some kind of deal to bring in starting pitching?
Yeah, and we don't know. You're right. We don't know that much about Pineda yet. But when you're talking about a pitcher who's had his history of arm problems, and you hear forearm strain, that is often a euphemism for Tommy John's situation. Oh. And, we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, there's sometimes, like earlier in the year when Tanaka had the wrist issue, everyone assumed he was going to get Tommy John. That wasn't the case. It wasn't as bad as people expected, and maybe that'll be the situation with Michael Pineda. But, they already, I think, were in a mode in which they were very open to the idea of making a value-type deal if it presented itself, and I think this will certainly redouble their efforts down that line.
Any chance they bring up Severino early to kind of combat this?
Yes. Yeah, and in fact, they have, the way they've used him early this year, they're in a position where he actually could help them going forward and not have to worry about a Steven Strasburg situation where he would bump up against innings. Now,
getting away from the arms for a second here and just going to Mark Teixeira, we saw the outburst during the big win over the Rangers. It's something very uncharacteristic for Mark Teixeira to show that kind of, passion or anger. Is this something that could actually be good for the Yankees to have this kind of flair on the team all of a sudden?
I have not been around them, so I can't tell you, exactly how everyone feels about what took place. I thought it was terrible.
Really?
I did, because I thought it was a classic case where, he showed up the third base coach, and Joe Girardi has come out and said everything's fine, and everybody is saying all the right things. Just as it played out, my question was, hey, if Mark Teixeira makes a mistake, if he doesn't get a good secondary lead, is the third base coach going to pitch a fit, throw a garbage can in the dugout? I mean, to me, the only real response in that type of situation for Teixeira, the best response would have been just say, you know what, I'm sorry that I showed up my coach that way. Because, like I said, if you saw a coach react that way to a mistake that the player made, are you kidding me? And it really surprised me, not only what Mark did, because you're right, it's totally uncharacteristic, but also his follow-up comments after the game when he didn't spare the third base coach at all by saying something like, hey, it's a mistake, no problem. We know he's a great third base coach and moving forward. I mean, he pretty much laid it out and said, yeah, it's a big mistake and it can't happen. I mean, come on. I'm sure that Mark Teixeira during the course of the year probably isn't perfect either, and I thought he should have given the coach more rope.
1045 The Team, 1045theteam.com. Armen and Levack joined by baseball insider Buster Olney. Buster, the other piece of emotion being shown in New York baseball went down last night. Wilmer Flores, have you ever seen something like that?
If you don't mind, Levack, I just want to follow up real quick on that. Just add one more thing to that. I can tell you that through the years, I've had conversations with many third base coaches when a runner gets thrown out at home and the first thing they do is pop up and stare down at the coach, boy, I'm telling you, that can rub them the wrong way, even if they're right, because their feeling is, hey, we're all on the same team. You don't need to do that. I know that there was a mistake involved. Why go there?
So what are the potential long-term repercussions from something like that?
There may not be any, and I mean, look, Teixeiras all I've ever heard is great things about him being a teammate. I don't think there would be a long-term thing, but I don't think that's like a building block thing where him showing emotion or reacting that way is a good thing. As I say, I think the only good outcome would have been if he just apologized for what he did.
Well, Buster Olney, man, he calls it as it is. And now, have you ever seen something like the Mets Wilmer Flores situation from last night?
No, and I know today here in New York the Mets are taking a lot of heat for it, but I got to tell you, I don't really see that the Mets did anything wrong. I think, and I don't know exactly which reporter did what to sort of get to this point. But I did see last night, as this was playing out, and so many reporters were having little tidbits and weighing in on it, there were in places reports that it was a done deal when it wasn't. And on the Mets broadcast, on radio, on television, that was being treated as if it was a done deal or very close to a done deal, and they were questioning why he was still on the field. Well, you know why he was still on the field was because he hadn't been traded yet, and the bottom line is that in 2015 with Twitter and all those other things, everyone is jumping the gun a little bit. And if the Mets were to have pulled Wilmer Flores off the field because he was merely being discussed in a trade or he was in some sort of a trade proposal, if you did that every day, you'd be pulling 3-4 guys off the field for every team in this last week before the trade deadline. So, look, I haven't minced any words where I think the Mets have been in terms of not being willing to take on money for trades, and I think the Mets deserve some criticism for things, but in this case, absolutely not. I think that's probably comes out of the mistakes of reporters going too far in what they put out there.
Should Mets fans actually be looking at this the other way? Like, the Mets are making big moves. This is a good thing, right?
Well, and there is, and I will tell you, like there's stuff coming out of Milwaukee that really the reason why this trade was blown up was because the Mets didn't want to take on the Gomez money, that they were using the concerns about Gomez's hip as an excuse. And I can tell you, everything I've heard today is completely the contrary, that there were concerns about Gomez's hip. And he did have a hip issue earlier in the year. Anybody with Google can look that up. I do think it was a good sign that they're willing to take on Gomez. And from what I hear, Mets ownership in this case was saying go for it. And they were ready to do that deal. But this part is true, that I think if you're in the front office and you have few opportunities to spend money, what you don't want to get back from the doctor is, this is a serious hip issue that, has a chance to regress as time goes along. You want someone to come in that you feel like is not going to have a physical problem.
What are the odds that Flores still gets moved?
It depends on who they talk about. I think the more pertinent question probably is how many options are actually out there in the trade market, and the answer is none. Not none, but few. You could trade for Justin Upton, but he's been terrible the last 2 months. You could trade or try to trade for Gerardo Parra, but what do you think the attitude of the Brewers is going to be toward the Mets in any trade conversations right now? You can go around baseball and look at other guys, but they're just not guys who would have been the perfect fit, I think, that you would have seen with Carlos Gomez. Jay Bruce was another guy I know that the Mets have looked at. But I think he's so inconsistent, or has been in the last couple of years, and he's dealt with some serious injuries, that I think that is frightening him away.
Buster Olney, Baseball Insider, brought to you by Buffalo Wild Wings right here on 104.5 The Team, 104.5theteam.com. Buster, as we approach the trade deadline, what are you looking at? What are the big moves still out there that you think might get done?
San Diego Padres seem to be at the center of everything right now because they have a lot of guys that they're trying to move, but they haven't moved yet. And so it wouldn't surprise me if, they make 4 or 5 trades in the next, 24 hours before the deadline, whether it's a Craig Kimbrell, James Shields, Tyson Ross, Andrew Kashner, Will Venable. They've got so many guys that they're attempting to move, and a lot of moving parts. And So I think they'll be at the center of things. Most of the big guys now have come off the board between Cole Hamels and Johnny Cueto and David Price.
So there's no big surprise coming out there. The epicenter is San Diego, and that's where you think most of the movement will be?
Yeah, I do, but I mean, far be it from me to pretend that I know everything that's being talked about. I sure as heck didn't think Troy Tulowitzki was going to wind up in Toronto. Those are the things I've heard most about, and you are starting to hear from different general managers that, you know what, we're probably done going down to the deadline. And I'll say it again, I think the Yankees are just lying in wait. They're the snake in the grass right now in the trade market, where if they wind up doing something big, it wouldn't surprise me, because I think there's more pressure on that organization to win this year than they're sort of acknowledging publicly, and they do have prospects, and they do certainly have money to deal, and you might see them leading down the deadline if a team like the Marlins called and said, look, can you just take Prado's money off our hand? Wouldn't surprise me if they did that. It wouldn't surprise me if they're the team that winds up doing something for, and again, I'm riffing here, a Tyson Ross, a Craig Kimbrell. I think they're going to be aggressive here in these last hours.
Buster, there's some speculation. Any chance Troy Tulowitzki moves again?
Not anytime soon. I was told by the Blue Jays that they wanted him during the wintertime, and they wanted him, leading up the trade deadline this year. They got their guy. Now, there's a chance, especially if the Blue Jays don't make the playoffs, that they're going to have turnover in their front office. Alex Anthopoulos, we'll see if the next team president winds up retaining him. But if they keep him, if Alex is kept, then I think it's probably more likely that the Blue Jays keep Troy Tulowitzki. It will be interesting to see if Tulowitzki winds up trying to nudge his way out of Toronto. I know this. I've always thought that, first off, I love Toronto. It's a beautiful city. It's a great city, and a lot of times when players are concerned about playing there, some of that I think can be overstated, and they sort of get that feel once they go there. That's certainly what happened with Mark Burley, Jose Reyes. There was talk about, do you want to go to Toronto? And then they got there, and it was great.
He's Buster Olney, and he is Nails, as always, Baseball Insider. Buster, thank you so much. And next week we'll talk to you and see if after the trade deadline there's some new favorites emerging throughout the Major League Baseball ranks.
That sounds great, sir.